Hello, Jessica Frost Ballas here with a video for MFT stamps. Today I've created an interactive card featuring an adorable slumbering sloth and a cascade of sparkling starlight. So let's get started. First, I created the background for my card by blending Distress Oxide inks onto a large panel of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm blending Broken China, Blueprint Sketch, Chipped Sapphire, and Black Soot Oxide ink onto a panel cut to about 5¼ inches by 10 inches. This card design uses two panels a little smaller than an A2 panel, so by blending a large panel at the same time that will cut both of the smaller panels, I can make sure that the transitions between colors will match. I use a pretty heavy hand here to make sure the ink really covers the paper and go back and forth quite a bit, as you'll see, until I'm happy with the transition between colors. I love working with the oxides because they stay wet and kind of sit on top of the paper for a while, which allows you to keep working with them. Once I finish blending, I set the panel aside to dry completely. Next, I stamped the sleepy sloth on the moon and a bunch of stars from Slumbering Sloths with VersaFine and heat embossed them with clear embossing powder. Then I color them with Copic markers. I start by laying down the lightest color on the moon and then add the darkest. I blend out to the lightest shade and then add additional shading with the darker markers as necessary. I used to blend from the darkest to the lightest, but I find that laying down the lightest color first seems to help the other colors blend better. When I finish the moon and stars, I color the sloth in my favorite shades for fur, E40 in the E70 range. It's a warm grayish brown that's really pretty and perfect for fur. I color his pajamas in a rose pink and then die cut all the images with the coordinating dynamics. Once my background panel is dry, I spritz it a few times with water and blot off the excess to create stars in my night sky. Then I die cut half the panel with the Falling from the Clouds die. Next, I trim the other half of the panel down to 3 3/4 by 4 3/4 inches. I also save the inner portion die cut from the cloud panel for an easy second card that I'll show at the end of this video. I die cut the cloud panel from a piece of dark blue cardstock and adhere it behind the blended panel to give it a little more stability. Then I splatter all the blended panels with white gouache to create more stars in the sky and let them dry completely. While they're drying, I die cut the little tabbed piece from the Falling from the Clouds dynamic set twice from white cardstock. I also cut a few pieces of foam mounting tape to 3 3/4 inches by 1/4 inch. The foam tape will allow the beads to move freely along the panel. The white pieces will go on either end of my smaller blended panel and have little notches that will hold my string in place. I start by adhering my foam mounting strips to each end of the blended panel. Then I remove the adhesive backing and adhere the white piece, making sure the notched side is hanging off the end of the blended panel. The embossed marks along the center of the short side help with the placement. Then I repeat that process on the other side. Next, I take clear string or monofilament line and cut a piece for the panel. It's easy enough to adhere the string to the panel, so I prefer to use smaller pieces rather than trying to handle one piece of string for the entire panel. First, I thread one end through the first notch and then adhere it to the back of the panel with double-sided adhesive. Then I take the other end and thread 5 sparkly silver bugle beads onto the thread. You can use any beads you'd like, you just want enough to cover about 3/4 inch. After I thread the 5 beads, I pull the string down through the bottom notch and then over to the next notch on the left. I pull the string up and add 5 more beads. I repeat this process going back and forth until I've pulled string through each of the notches. I needed 2 pieces of string to complete the panel, and you can see where I've attached the ends to the back. At this point, the beads should slide freely back and forth, and now it's time to start assembling the card. First, I adhere another strip of foam mounting tape to each end of the panel on top of where I placed the first piece of tape. Again, this will allow the beads to move freely without being smushed down by the top panel. If you use large beads or sequins, you may need to adjust the layers of foam tape so that everything moves smoothly. With the white pieces attached, the blended panel is exactly the same length as the top cloud panel. So I use a trick I learned from my friend Laura Davilo and trim a little bit off the notched ends to make sure they can't be seen sticking out. Just trim the tiniest bit off and make sure you don't accidentally cut any of the strings. You can see that the blended panel now fits on the cloud panel with a narrow border around all the edges. That just makes it a little easier to adhere without worrying about things sticking out around the edges. I started to adhere the blended panel to the cloud panel and then realized I needed foam tape on the cloud panel as well. I added a double layer of foam tape on the sides of the cloud panel to give the card a little more stability. Then I adhered the blended panel. I just love playing with this card. The sound of the beads is so fun. Next, I add adhesive to the back of the blended panel and adhere it to a white card base. I've die cut another cloud panel from white cardstock, and this time I trim off the top cloud portion. I use scissors to continue the rounded edges so it matches. Then I place the cloud in my MISTI and stamp a sentiment from Slumbering Sloths with VersaFine and heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. I adhere that cloud to the top of the cloud panel, and then I adhere all of my Copic colored images. I use liquid glue for the stars and HG adhesive for the sloth, making sure not to apply any adhesive where the sloth will touch the beads. Then I apply a little Spectrum Noir clear sparkle to the stars and moon and add a few accents with a white gel pen to finish the card with a little extra sparkle. And here's the finished card. I love how those beads move and give the impression of falling stars. Remember that little blended panel I kept from the cloud panel? Well, I created another quick card by inlaying it in a cloud panel cut from white cardstock and adding a die-cut rainbow and sentiment from the Miss Your Hugs card kit. And that's it. You can find more information on all the products I used in the YouTube description below. I hope you enjoyed today's card. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have an amazing day and happy crafting. Bye!